Nebraska Territory, May 1871. The wind howled across the open prairie like it was mourning something, and maybe it was. Maybe it was mourning with her. Hollis Lantry stood barefoot in the dirt behind the cabin her husband built, hands covered in blood, breath shallow, dress soaked through. The cry never came. She had waited for it with her heart trembling, prayed for it between the crushing waves of pain. But all that came was silence. The baby was born still. Her daughter small, perfect, lifeless. The midwife had tried to offer words, but Hollis had not heard them. She had wrapped the baby in a scrap of flannel she had sewn during long winter evenings, then held her until the sun set and the stars blinked out one by one. Then she laid her down in a pinewood box her husband built months ago in hope, not knowing it would serve as a coffin. That was 2 weeks ago. Since then, Hollis had not left the cabin much. She ate only what she had to. The garden was half tended, the chickens restless. Her husband Everett had barely spoken since the burial. He chopped wood until his hands bled and then disappeared on horseback 3 days ago. He had not come back. When the knock came on the door that morning, she did not answer it. It came again. She opened the door because anything was better than silence. A man stood there. Not young, but not old. Tall, lean, dark-haired. His hat was in his hand and his boots were covered in dust. He looked like he had ridden far. "Ma'am," he said, voice low and steady. "My name is Bram Vexley. I live 2 valleys over. I am sorry to trouble you." She said nothing. Just looked at him. He cleared his throat, nervous. "I lost my wife last winter. Fever took her. I have a daughter, Clara. She is 5. She ran off this morning while I was fixing the fence. I tracked her this way. She's small, wears a blue dress. You see her?" Hollis blinked. "No, I have not seen a child." His jaw tightened. Worry pulled at his features. "I reckon I will keep looking, then. Sorry to bother you." She nodded and began to close the door. But something in her chest stirred. A flicker of something that had not stirred since the stillbirth. She opened the door again. "Wait." He turned back. "I will help you look." His eyes searched hers, cautious. "You sure?" "Yes." She pulled on her boots and stepped outside, the sun warm against her face. For the first time in days, the air did not feel like it was pressing down on her. They walked in silence through the edge of the woods behind her land. He checked the ground for prints, pointed out broken twigs. She followed, eyes sharp. After an hour, they found the doll. A rag-stuffed thing with button eyes and yellow yarn hair. It sat at the base of an old cottonwood tree. "She never goes far without that," Bram said, voice tight. "She cannot be far, then." They split up to cover more ground. Hollis moved through the brush, heart thudding harder than it should have. She had not moved this much in weeks. Her legs ached, but she kept going. Then she heard a small whimper. Faint. Coming from the creek bed. She climbed down and spotted the girl. Clara sat behind a fallen log, knees scraped, dress muddy, face streaked with tears. Hollis crouched slowly. "Clara." The child froze. "It is all right," Hollis said gently. "I am a friend. Your papa is looking for you." Clara blinked at her. "I fell. My foot hurts." Hollis reached her slowly. "May I help you?" Clara nodded, eyes wide. Hollis lifted her carefully, cradled her close. The girl was warm and light and smelled like wildflowers and dirt. Her small hand clung to Hollis's sleeve. When she got back up the ridge, Bram was coming through the trees fast, eyes frantic. "Clara. Papa." He ran to them, arms out. Hollis handed the child to him, watching the way his hands trembled as he held her. "You scared me half to death," he whispered into Clara's hair. "I am sorry," Clara said, voice muffled. He looked up at Hollis, eyes full. "Thank you." Hollis nodded, throat tight. "She is all right, just a little scraped. I do not know how to repay you. You do not have to." But something had shifted. She felt it in her chest, like a window cracking open after a long winter. He hesitated, then said, "Would you come by sometime?" "Clara, she does not have anyone but me. And you were kind." "I do not know," she said honestly. He nodded. "All right." But when he turned to leave, Clara looked over his shoulder and reached out. "Will you come visit us?" she asked. Hollis could not speak for a second. Then she said, "Maybe I will." Bram smiled. "A real one." It was tired, but honest. "Our place is just past the ridge. If you ever feel like company." He tipped his hat and carried Clara back through the trees. Hollis stood there a long time after they left, the warmth of the child's arms still around her neck. She looked down at the rag doll still in her hand. Clara must have dropped it again. She brought it inside and set it gently on the table. The cabin felt different now. Not lighter exactly, but not as heavy either. She looked out across the prairie. Maybe tomorrow she would ride out past the ridge, just to return the doll. Nothing more. But as she sat at the table, staring at the little yarn-haired doll, her heart ached in a way that felt almost alive again. And that meant something. 2 days passed before Hollis saddled her mare. The doll, still on her table, had started to feel like it belonged to the space now, its crooked stitches and faded yarn hair quietly watching her move through the room. A part of her had worried the girl might cry without it at night. She didn't carry the doll in her hand. That felt too deliberate. Instead, she tucked it into her satchel beneath a folded flour sack and a tin of dried apple slices. Not a gift exactly, just something to share. The ride past the ridge was longer than she remembered, though she'd only ever traveled it once before, years ago when Everett had traded a sack of oats with a man who lived in those parts. The trail narrowed past the cottonwoods, winding between bluffs where the earth opened in quiet, grassy valleys. She didn't meet anyone along the way, only a pair of jays squabbling above a spruce and the distant shapes of antelope grazing near a dry wash. When she reached Bram's homestead, the sun had begun its slow descent. The house stood small against a line of low hills, its roof patched with mismatched shingles, a chicken coop leaning slightly to one side. The smoke curling from the stovepipe smelled faintly of lard and cornmeal. She dismounted and waited, unsure if she should knock or call out. Before she could decide, the door opened. Bram stepped out, wiping his hands on a rag. His sleeves were rolled to the elbows and sawdust clung to his arms. "I wasn't sure you'd come," he said. "I wasn't sure I would either." He looked at the satchel. "You bring something?" She nodded. She left this behind. Clara appeared behind him, her face lighting up when she spotted the bag. "My dolly." "She missed you," Hollis said. Clara took it with both hands, clutching it to her chest. "She says thank you. Tell her she's welcome." Bram stepped aside. "We were just about to eat. You're welcome to join us if you've the mind." She hesitated. "I didn't draw water yet," he added. "Could use an extra hand." She followed him to the well. The bucket creaked on the rope as it descended. "I built this well last year. Took me near a month. Hard work. Most things are." He handed her the full bucket. She carried it back, feeling the strain in her arms. But it was clean effort, honest and grounding. Clara had set 3 tin bowls on the table inside. The cabin was plain but tidy. A patched quilt hung over the window, and a small wooden horse sat on the sill above it. The smell of cornbread filled the room. "I only had salt pork left," Bram said, spooning stew into the bowls. "Not much of a feast." "It smells fine." Clara climbed onto a stool, her legs swinging. "Papa burned the bread last time." Bram gave her a look. "She tells on me every chance she gets." "She's got spirit," Hollis said. "She takes after her mother." The tone of his voice shifted. Not heavy but reverent. He didn't say more and she didn't ask. They ate in silence for a while. Clara tapped her spoon against her bowl when she was done. "Do you know any songs?" she asked. Hollis thought for a moment. "I used to sing one about a hawk with golden feathers. My mother taught it to me." "Sing it." "I don't sing much anymore." Clara tilted her head. "You could try." Bram didn't say anything, only kept his eyes on the table. Hollis took a breath, then sang soft and low. The melody wasn't sweet so much as steady, like wind moving through long grass. Clara listened with her head resting on her arms. Bram did not look up, but his hand slowed on the spoon. When the song ended, the child whispered, "It sounded like flying." Hollis smiled faintly. "That's how it's meant to sound." Clara yawned, and Bram carried her to the small bed tucked behind a canvas curtain. He returned, folding his arms across his chest. She liked your voice? She's a good girl. I worry I'm not giving her enough. Hollis looked at him. You're doing better than most. He leaned against the doorframe, eyes on the darkening sky. I keep thinking things will settle. Then something else breaks or spoils. I fix what I can, but it's never quiet for long. No, it isn't. He didn't turn toward her, only said, You seem like you know something about that. I do. The silence between them wasn't empty this time. It held something unspoken, not yet ready to be named. She rose. I should head back before the light's gone. He followed her outside. The air had cooled, and the stars were beginning to show. I'll ride with you to the ridge, he said. Coyotes move through these parts after dusk. They didn't talk much on the ride back. Just the creaking of leather and the soft thud of hooves. When they reached the ridge, she slowed her mare. You don't have to ride the whole way. I know. He looked at her then, something in his expression careful but open. You're welcome back. Anytime. She nodded. I might come again. He didn't push for more. As she rode down the slope alone, the wind lifted strands of her hair, and the prairie opened wide before her. The ache in her chest hadn't gone, but it had changed shape, less sharp now, edged with a quiet warmth she hadn't expected. And behind her, in the hills, a man and his daughter waited in a home that no longer felt so far. It was nearly a week before she saw them again. Hollis had gone to the creek that morning, needing water for the wash. The sun hung low, gold in the grasses, and the air smelled of damp soil and cottonwood. She crouched near the bank, scrubbing a shirt against the washboard when she heard hoofbeats across the rise. Clara's voice came first, loud and full of delight. There she is. Hollis stood, wiping her hands against her skirt as Bram rode into view, Clara seated in front of him, her arms looped loosely around his arm. We were headed to town, he said, reining in beside the creek. Thought we'd stop and see if you'd like to come. She looked down at the soap-roughened shirt. I've got wash to finish. Clara leaned toward her. Papa said he'd buy licorice if the store has it. Bram added, and we could use another set of eyes at the general store. Clara has a habit of reaching for things we can't afford. I do not, Clara said indignantly. Hollis hesitated, then folded the shirt and set it in the pail. I'll get my shawl. The ride into town was slow, Clara nodding off against Bram's chest as the sun warmed her hair. Hollis rode beside them, quiet, watching the way Bram held the reins one-handed to steady the girl. She'd been to town dozens of times in the past, but never with someone riding alongside her. McGreevy's store stood near the livery, its windows clouded with dust. Inside, the air smelled of dried beans and tobacco. Clara perked up once her feet hit the plank floor, eyes darting from shelf to shelf. Only what's on the list? Bram reminded her, lifting a folded scrap of paper from his vest. Hollis followed Clara to the back, where a tin of peppermint sticks sat behind the counter. While Bram spoke to the storekeep about seed prices, Clara whispered up to Hollis, Do you think he'll remember the licorice? I think if you remind him kindly, he just might. Clara nodded, then moved to a crate of calico bolts, running her fingers over the cloth. This one feels like a cloud. Hollis touched it. It would make a fine summer dress. I only have 2 dresses left that fit. Maybe he'll sew you a new one. Clara giggled. Papa can't sew. Bram appeared beside them, holding a wrapped bundle in brown paper. We'll see what scraps Mrs. Elkins has. You can help with the cutting. Clara turned to Hollis. Would you come to supper tonight? Bram didn't answer for her. Hollis glanced at the window where the light had shifted to early afternoon. I'd need to feed the chickens first. We'll wait, Bram said. So they rode back with the sun behind them, the wind soft through the wheatgrass. Hollis veered off toward her homestead, promising to meet them before dusk. She arrived at their place while Bram was hanging a strip of venison to dry. Clara sat on the porch, legs crossed, humming to herself as she tied blades of grass into knots. Inside, the stove crackled with the smell of onions and meat. Bram stirred the pot while Clara set 3 plates on the table, careful not to drop any. After they ate, Clara curled on the floor with her rag doll, tracing circles along the wood grain with her fingertip. Bram poured hot water into a tin basin and set it on the table. "Tea?" he asked. She nodded. He poured 2 cups and sat across from her, elbows resting lightly on the table's edge. The firelight caught the side of his face, casting a faint glow along his jaw. "I've been meaning to ask," he said. "What brought you west?" "My husband wanted land." "He still want it?" "No," she said quietly. "Not anymore." Bram didn't press. "I came for the same reason. Thought I'd find something solid. Ended up with more wind than promised for a while." She traced the rim of her cup with her finger. "You've built something here." "I try." Outside, Clara had stopped humming. Her breathing was slow and even. "She's asleep," Hollis said. "She'll sleep anywhere there's quiet." They sat in the hush that followed, the air thick with wood smoke and something more tender. Bram's hands were rough around the knuckles, but steady. He didn't fidget or force words. "I never expected to find much kindness again," Hollis said. He looked at her then, steady. "I didn't expect it either. But here we are." She didn't smile, but her gaze held his. "It's not something I take lightly." "Neither do I." She stood then, slowly. "I should head home. I'll walk you to the horse." The evening had cooled, and the stars were beginning to show. He held the reins while she mounted, then stepped back. "We'll be at home most days," he said. "If you ever need anything." She nodded, fingers tightening on the reins. "I'll remember that." He didn't reach for her, didn't try to hold the moment longer than it deserved. But as she turned her horse toward the open dark, she felt the warmth of his presence like a lantern just behind her shoulder. And for the first time in a long while, she didn't feel afraid of where the path ahead might lead. The wheatgrass near Hollis's barn had gone dry at the tips, the green sapped out by the sun. She bent low with the scythe, her skirts tucked up past her knees, sweat lining her back. The work steadied her, kept her from thinking too long in one direction. Late in the afternoon, she heard a wagon rolling slow up the slope. She didn't stand right away, just waited to hear the creak of leather and the low jangle of harness. When she turned, Bram was easing down from the seat, the reins looped through a fence slat. Clara sat beside a small butter crock on the bench. "I brought you something," he said, lifting the crock down. Clara churned it herself. "Said it was for your bread." "I haven't baked this week." Clara tilted her head. "Then we'll eat it on cornbread." "Papa made that yesterday and it's still good." "I imagine it is," Hollis said, brushing grass from her hands. Bram glanced at the scythe. "You working the whole field?" "It needs cutting. The wind's been laying it flat. I can come back tomorrow with the cradle, if you're not set against help." Her eyes met his. "I won't turn it down." Clara climbed down from the wagon bed and wandered toward the chicken coop, her doll tied across her back with a strip of gingham. Hollis watched her pick up a stick and poke at the dirt, talking softly to something only she heard. "She tells the chickens stories," Bram said. "Says they lay better if they're entertained." She might be right. He stepped closer, the butter crock still in his hand. "I know you don't need anything, but I was thinking if you wanted, Clara could stay with you some afternoons. I've got fence to mend down by the south lot and she gets restless waiting." Hollis studied him. "You trust her here?" "I already do." She nodded. "I can mind her. She won't be underfoot." "I didn't think she would be." He handed her the crock. His fingers brushed hers just briefly, but neither of them pulled away too fast. "Will you come to the summer gathering next week?" he asked. "What for?" "Reckon there'll be some trading, a pie contest, fiddle playing. Clara wants to see the lambs the Millers are bringing. I've not been in years. Might be time." She didn't answer, but she didn't say no. He looked out across the field where the wind was lifting dust in thin spirals. "I keep thinking things will get easier. But maybe they don't. Maybe you just get steadier inside them. I used to think it would all settle one day. Now I think maybe it's just about finding something worth standing still for." He turned his head, eyes still on the field. "You're something steady, Hollis." She looked down at the butter crock. "So are you," Clara called out then, waving a feather she'd found. "There's a blue egg in the coop." Hollis smiled. That hen lays strange. She says it's magic, Bram said. Finds wonder in everything. There are worse things to find. He helped her cover the grass piles with canvas before he left. They didn't talk much while they worked, but she felt the quiet shift between them, less like absence and more like something being built plank by plank. When the wagon rolled away, Clara waved until the crest of the hill took them out of sight. Hollis stood there a long while, the butter crock warm in her hand, the wind brushing her cheek like a question she was almost ready to answer. The day of the summer gathering dawned warm and dry, the air carrying the scent of trampled sage and the faint sweetness of wild rose. Hollis brushed the dust from her hem and pinned her hair in a simple coil. She hadn't worn her blue dress since before the baby. It hung looser at the waist now, but the fabric was clean and cool against her skin. She didn't look in the glass. There wasn't any need. By the time she rode into the valley where the gathering was held, the field was already dotted with wagons and makeshift tables. A string of quilts flapped between two sycamores and the low sound of a fiddle drifted across the grass. She tethered her mare near a patch of shade and walked toward the crowd, careful not to glance around too obviously. Bram stood near the far end of the lot, talking to a man with a sunburned neck and a limp in his right leg. Clara was crouched beside a lamb, her hands full of clover. When she looked up and saw Hollis, her whole face lit and she ran across the grass without hesitation. "You came." "I said I might," Hollis said, settling her hand on the girl's shoulder. "You look taller already." "I got new boots. Papa traded for them." Clara stuck out her foot proudly. "They'll last you through winter, I reckon." Bram approached at a slower pace, brushing hay from his sleeve. "I thought maybe the crowd would keep you away," he said. "I nearly stayed home. But then I thought Clara might want someone to see her boots. She's been showing them to every chicken and goat in reach." Hollis glanced around. "This is more than I expected. First time they've held it here since the hard freeze 2 winters back. Folks needed something to gather for." He didn't reach for her, but he didn't look away either. The sound of the fiddle picked up, fast and light. Clara tugged Hollis's hand. "Will you walk with me? I want to show you the doll dresses the Miller girl made." "I'd like that." Bram gave a small nod. "I'll be by the table with the sweet corn, if you want to find me later." They wandered through the stalls, Clara pointing out everything with breathless delight, the colored threads someone had brought up from Missouri, a woman knitting baby socks with needles that clicked like sparrow wings, a man carving a pipe stem from bone. "She said her mom made this one," Clara whispered, holding up a small dress stitched with tiny red flowers. "Can I try?" Hollis helped her slide it onto the rag doll's frame. "It fits." Clara beamed. "Maybe you could make one like it someday. If you want. I think I'd like that." They found Bram again near the edge of the crowd, a wrapped parcel of sweet corn under one arm. He looked at Hollis a little longer than he needed to, his eyes catching hers before he turned to Clara. "I've got something for you," he said, kneeling beside the girl. "It's not much." He pulled a small wooden horse from his satchel, its legs carved clean, a short leather strip for reins. Clara gasped and hugged it to her chest without a word. "You made that?" Hollis asked quietly. "I whittled it down by the fence row last week. She's been making fences for her doll. Figured she needed stock to go with." They sat together under the sycamores while the sun dipped lower. Clara curled up beside them, horse cradled in one arm, doll in the other. The music slowed and someone began a hymn, low and full. Across the field, lanterns were being lit one by one. Bram leaned closer, voice low. "I've been thinking." She turned slightly toward him. "I can't promise much. Can't promise quiet days or easy ones. But I've got a roof that doesn't leak. And a child who already looks to you like you're part of her whole world." Hollis didn't speak yet. The breeze stirred her dress, lifted the edge of the picnic cloth. "I know you've been through more than you let on," he said. "I won't ask you to open all at once. He stopped, swallowed. "I'd like to build something steady with you, if you'll have it." She let the words settle. Then she reached for his hand, her fingers threading through his, warm and sure. "I'm not afraid of work," she said. "And I've been alone long enough." He looked down at their joined hands, his thumb brushing the side of hers. "Then stay." "I will." He didn't kiss her, not there on the grass with half the county around them. But he looked at her like he might, someday soon, and she looked back the same. Clara stirred in her sleep and mumbled something about horses and fences. They both smiled. They rode back together in the dusk, Hollis behind Bram's wagon, their conversation easy, unhurried. She stayed the night in the small room beside Clara's, where Bram had set up a cot and left a folded quilt. In the morning, she baked cornbread and Clara set 3 plates without being asked. Weeks passed. Then months. The harvest came and they gathered it together, Hollis stripping beans from their vines while Bram hauled squash from the ground. Clara ran between rows, her laughter light in the autumn air. In December, they married beside the stove, just the 3 of them and the preacher who traveled through every 4th Sunday. Clara held the Bible, her face solemn with pride. That night, Hollis stood at the doorway of the cabin, the cold sharp in her lungs, the stars clean and endless above. Bram came up behind her, wrapped his arms around her waist. "You warm enough?" he asked. She leaned back into him. "I am now." Later, as the fire burned low and Clara slept with her doll tucked under her chin, they lay side by side beneath the quilt Bram's mother had pieced years ago. His hand found hers in the dark. "This feels like breathing again," she whispered. "It feels like home," he answered. And it was. For both of them. For good.